always be yourself, always be show up as you, it doesn't matter, show up with the curls in the hair, the way you walk, your style, like do all of that, because, when you are able to come out as you and be the best of you, then nothing can stop you, right? Like, I'm a firm believer that creativity is the extent of your imagination, but you can't get there if you don't know who you are. What's going on, everybody? My name is Walter T Geer. I am the Chief Creative Officer of Innovation North America VML.
Walt, it's good to be with you today.
Man, it's good to be back and see you again.
Yeah, it's always good to see you, and I'm excited for us to be in conversation. I think, transparently, there's so many questions that I have for you as an inspiration in the industry, not only to myself, but clearly
Appreciate you, man.
to so many people who look like us.
Well, hopefully I can answer.
Yeah, I'm sure you'll do well. I'm sure you'll do well. I mean, I want to maybe take this from the beginning to what you're doing now.
Absolutely.
And I know this is a culmination of a series that we've done, a colleague to colleague, but I think that the work that you're doing is so important and so impactful that everyone's excited and interested in what you have to say. And so I hope to be just a conduit of that,
All right,
or part of it.
I have diarrhea of the mouth, man, so it's going to flow, it's going to come.
Good, but let's get to it. So I'd love to maybe start with you telling me about you getting into the industry, or just the interest in advertising, marketing, and technology. Was that something from a young person, or did you pick that up in maybe teenage years or college years and such?
Yeah, it's funny. It's like a lot of people in the Black community aren't really we don't know of advertising like some others might. And so, some of us are coming in non-traditional ways. And, I by far am a creative that didn't come in the traditional way in terms of, the design school or art school and all this stuff. Like, not that guy, was not the guy that was like, one day I want to make commercials, and I dreamt of it when I was a kid, and now it's like, oh. Yeah. But no, I was always good at drawing. My parents saw that in me. My dad was always getting me tons of comics and whatnot. And, went to school for, my first semester was nursing.
Nice.
Right? So not nice, man. Because like, I'm giving bed baths and washing asses, and I was like, oh my God, like 6 a.m. clinicals on a Wednesday when you're like 18. I was like, bro, this is, bro, I got a 1.6 GPA that semester. Wow. Okay? And my dad had to help write a letter on my behalf to get me back in the next semester. But like, I went into school and did business, and, transferred out of there to Monmouth University in New Jersey, and I couldn't afford to finish school my last year. So, it was all of what I am today and what I'm doing today is because of my father, man, because, he was like, you should get into this web design stuff. And I was like, I don't know anything about it, right? And he put my resume up on monster.com and got me an interview, submitted all these applications, got me an interview, was like, you got an interview tomorrow. I'm like, what? Wow. And I went in and interviewed at this company, and I told them that I knew things I didn't know, right? Like JavaScript and HTML and Photoshop, and I don't know any of that shit at all, and got the job. And I asked for like 3 weeks time to kind of, instead of the 2 weeks, so I can start to, learn it. And I went home and started learning. My dad was like, let me get you these classes in the evenings as well to double up on that. So I was taking classes in the evening at this whatever random school, and I continued to learn on the job, man. And that's how I got in. But, it was a basic web design job. And next thing you know, I'm focusing on rich media and all this type of stuff, because in 99, 2000, like no one knew what was going on the web. So that time, it was easier for someone like myself to get involved, because like no one knew what the fuck was going on. It was like making shit up and throwing shit at a wall and hoping it sticks. Whereas like now, it's like that same story might definitely not work. Like me today starting would not work out.
Yeah, that makes sense. So you got into technology around the .com burst, right? I want to talk more about your father being your first sponsor, which is an amazing thing. But can you explain kind of what that vibe was like over that time period? You working in technology, web development, many people investing in it, and then there's a bubble burst, at least at that time.
Yeah, I mean, that was like when the very first music streaming started to happen, right? And some of the first like live podcast interviews, and we were doing live streams and whatnot. And I went over to JP Morgan for a while, and it was like I went from $7 an hour 6 months before to like running front end design on JP Morgan's website, moving to Boston. And again, like my dad was like, I was engaged to my wife at the time and like couldn't find a place. My dad's like, why don't you both come move in with me in my 1-bedroom apartment and his dog. And we were there for like 3 months. He found an apartment that was like a block away. It was stupid expensive. He was like, I'll pay for half, don't worry, I'll pay for this and you guys go. So again, being a sponsor all the way through. But you know, when I was at JP Morgan, I think that was at a time where advertising just started to pop, right? And this thing called Flash all of a sudden popped up, and they're like, oh my gosh, we could do banners with Flash, and now we can create this thing called rich media because there's a rich content and expandable banners. And at the same time, I ended up moving over to the New York Times, which was a beautiful thing because that was the job that allowed me to really immerse myself in technology, or immerse myself in like what it is to drive engagements and interactions from consumer. Because up until that time, I was like doing little web pages and throwing up images here and there. And it was interesting, man. I was, you know, part of the team that invented sequential messaging, which for those who don't know, sequential messaging is the ads that follow you everywhere you go after you visit a site. Go to buy some shoes, and then I was like, oh my God, these shoes are everywhere.
So he's a part of responsibility for that, which some people love. As advertisers, we love, right? Some people don't, but you know, that's what funds the media world.
It is. So we've done, you know, I've done some bad, because that's a really, the shit still annoys me. But I've done some good too. Like later on, when I was at Viacom, I actually invented skippable pre-roll, right? Which is the 5, 4, 3, 2, 1 skip you see in video content. So it's the landscape was wild because yes, Flash was in, everything's using it, went over to sites, and then one day Google's like, Flash is a wrap, we're not supporting it on our browser or on our mobile devices. Wow. And then it just plummeted. Then up came this rise of like DHTML and you know, responsive ads and like ads at Flex and using DHTML and things of that nature. And then of course, next thing you know, mobile devices come out. So we see these peaks and these downs, Like when mobile devices came out, I think for creatives, it was very hard because it's like we've been used to throwing tons of shit on the page, overlays, and someone's coming out here and grabbing the logo and shitting on it. It's like crazy stuff to like, we have these tiny screens now and there's like, you just don't have the real estate. So everything flipped on its head, and now that kind of brought in this whole kind of world of data and the importance of first party data. And now when you're carrying these mobile devices in your pocket and going everywhere with it, the capturing location data, the type of content, sentiment, and it turned into this game of like, okay, less creative, but more of like, how can we inform someone in a manner that's now meaningful because we know all of this information.
Right, I love that. And what then is your transition from media technology into the advertising world, influencing media technology practices there?
Yeah, so, you know, I was at Viacom and places like, you know, Google and MySpace, which I helped sell MySpace to Justin Timberlake in specific media, which is weird in and of itself.
I mean, get back up there. So, I mean, maybe I'm skipping ahead too soon. Like, can we talk about some experiences at MySpace and you know?
Yeah, sure.
Because I think that's a key foundation to the digital media landscape. That
yeah. MySpace is wild, man. I mean, I got there at a time where they were kind of coming over that hump and starting to crash a bit. And so a lot of senior leadership from Viacom actually went over there and took a small group of people over with the intent that we have to build the brand back up and then sell. People are often scared of going to the companies that are plummeting. And I can tell you, it is the most fun I've ever had in my career, right? Because being at a place like that, they are most often or more than likely willing to do anything. And so like, I'm coming up with the craziest designs and craziest, I'm like, is this good? And our CEO was like, whatever. I don't care if it's sell it. You know, at the time we were getting like when I got there, we were getting like $300,000 a day for like a homepage takeover. And like users were falling. So like, how do you bring revenue up? And so I kind of, we created one of the very first, it was actually the second time we did it because we did it at Viacom before, biometrics usability labs. And through this, we were kind of tapping into the emotional state and cognitive state of an individual when they interact and engage with brands online. And through these kind of testing, we were able to kind of refine creative and make the perfect solutions. So I invented HD skins, which essentially is the videos that like skin the entire screen of a site. And we took those to like $1 million a day for a takeover.
Wow.
And like, so like what we took revenue back this way, even those users are going back this way. And it was just a wild experience, man, to be there in a time like that where I think I sat through 4 CEOs in 3 years.
Whoa.
Who were all trying to throw the Hail Mary pass.
How does one practice that creative technologist, spirit in that type of environment where you're going through 4 CEOs in 3, years?
Yeah, it's easier than being at most places, because again, like, each one was like, we got to figure this out, and as we figure it out, we have to make money from brands. So like, how do we set ourselves up, differently than the next folks? Facebook came in and they were like, we're gonna nail your activity stream, and that's all we give a shit about. MySpace was like, we got your horoscope, we got little twinkly stars over here, we got like it was so much. And by the time they were able to really kind of get it down into a really beautiful site and then launch, it was almost kind of too late, right? And they had kind of, most users had converted over. What's funny is to boost users up, we ended up using Facebook Connect. When Facebook Connect first launched, it was like the day it launched, everyone's like, well, maybe we use that as a way to get people back in. And it did. It shot our numbers back up because people were like, oh, it's easy. I could just use my Facebook to go over to my MySpace page or creative page. So it was interesting, but I'd say it's easy for creative technologists to be at a place like that because they're more flexible and willing to do whatever it takes. So your ability to kind of innovate and move around and break things was a lot easier. And it was probably one of the funnest times of my career because it just allowed me to just test things that I traditionally would not be able to do elsewhere.
That freedom. I can see that. And so now I'm seeing what inspired you to then go from media technology, I'd say, to then advertising. And what was your first role? And then how did you get to this kind of, I wouldn't say kind of, let me step back. What was your first role and how did you get to this chief creative officer role you're at today?
So it's funny. I had at the time gotten laid off, right? And I tell people, like, if you haven't been laid off at least once, you have not worked in advertising, right? It should, like, you should average 3 to 5 times and you're in the sweet spot. But so I got laid off and decided, I was like scrambling for work. And I'll never forget, my wife came into my office at the time and I was super stressed. And she was like, it's okay to be present. And then walked out the room. And it kind of blew my mind because I was like, wow, like, what the fuck does she mean by that, right? And then I kind of realized, I should just, like, I'm stressing out, like, let me take this time. I'm not in a bad place. We took some time, family traveled and whatnot. And, I'll never forget this moment of, like, feeling like, I wanted to talk to other Black creatives, executives, and reaching out and no one responding.
Wow.
And I was like, this is fucked up, man. There's, like, not many. And at the time I was a VP. And so, like, part of me was in my own head, like, oh, I'm a VP, you fuckers should respond to me. But, like, I was not any, like, so what? Like, I was nobody important. And, it made me realize the importance of giving back and also mentorship. So at this time, I started mentoring other Black creatives that would reach out to me. I was trying to be responsive as possible. And I was sharing a bunch of resumes from a lot of Black creatives on LinkedIn and started generating a lot of conversation around it. And I met this guy named Brian Gaffin who, in the process of going back and forth, and hey, I'm trying to fill this role. I gave him a bunch of resumes, and he's like, yo, what are you doing? And I was like, I'm chilling right now. He's like, nah, man, like we should talk. And I'm like, nah. And Brian was at TBWA, World Health, which is like all health. And I was like, ain't no fucking way I'm doing health. Like I've been doing Nike and all this crazy stuff, Heineken. Like I'm not fucking with health. And he's like, just come in and talk. So I went in and talked to them all. And I just loved them, man. Like, Paul Flatterer and Jonathan as well. Like, look, we all clicked, and I was just like, let's just see where we go. Nice. So they gave me a group creative director role, and at the time, it's advertising or the agency world is hard to get in to leadership positions without being there for several years. So they most certainly took a risk on me because it's not the common or traditional type of hire, and I spent about 6 months there before starting to have conversations with VML. And, I stayed at TBWA for a year, but it was interesting because I was this guy that came in here like, man, I do all this stuff. I know all this stuff. I'm going to come here and kill this shit. It's going to be so easy. And it was so hard. And so, I left TBWA to go to VML as an ECD about a year later, right? 5-6 months into the pandemic. And, my reason for going was because they said, hey, look, you got health experience, we love what you're doing, but we'd like you to fuck with health and non-health stuff. And so I kind of looked at it as like, oh, this is like my pathway to opening up into more type of work.
Yeah.
And I did like health. I truly did, because I think health is the only work that allows you to really do things that make an impact on individuals.
Absolutely.
Like putting feet in sneakers and asses in seats at movies is like, so what?
Yeah.
But like to change lives is different. And it's not going to get as much talk or clout as the other stuff, but it's feel good stuff. And as we get older, I think you start to realize that like it's important to do shit that matters.
Yeah.
So man, I got in there, and I came in as an ECD, and still it was a challenge. And now I've been at VML for 4 years, and in the agency space for 5, and I feel like this last year I'm finally getting it, right? And understanding like the approach, because how they do business, the whole politics of the thing, like it's all different. Yeah. And it's not just like I can jump in here and be the best fucking creative I want. There are incredible creatives on the agency side, and I'm thinking I'm hot shit. Like no, a lot better people than me, like on my team. And so for me, it's just incredibly inspiring to be around so many people that are just so creative, and just learning that process was a challenge. Which why I now understand why like the agencies typically only take people who get agency experience, because it's too long of a curve to try to keep bring someone in at an executive level and like teach them.
This is me, and I've done my homework, but maybe time is just fleeting. So you're 5 years into the agency world. Yeah. You have such a authority, I should say, and people really listen to you, and they look for your voice and for what you have to say in this industry. And so you mentioned, sharing things on LinkedIn before. So has your presence as a person who's like a mentor, right, who's like online and an advocate, that's prior to advertising, would you say?
I mean, when that job I got laid off from, I worked with a woman CMO there who's fantastic, named Julie, and she taught me to use my voice, actually, right? Nice. And it's like, I think many times for Black creatives, Black executives, I'll say, it's a challenge to use your voice, because once you get to the table, it's like, I don't really want to disrupt, and like if I say this thing, like then they're gonna feel real uncomfortable. And I think that, Black people, we have been conditioned, especially our age. Well, actually, you're younger than me. Yeah, but like
31.
You're a lot younger than me, man. I'm 47. I think we have been our generation, our parents would tell us that, hey, when you walk out the house, pull your pants up. When you talk to this police officer, when you talk to this elderly person, you talk to this white person over here, speak with manners, or speak this way. Don't. Yeah. So like we've been preconditioned to the point that when we get in the rooms or we do have the opportunities, we almost cower down, right? And so, I think that, for some time I was doing that, and Julie was like, hey, like you've got this incredible story, you should talk about it. Like, why don't you share your story? And I was worried, and we decided to go about it, and I worked with a writer named James, who was on the team, who also helped me. And my first piece of content that I put out into the world was called The Black Quarterback Effect. And I think it was like Ad Monsters or one of those guys that wrote it about it, I forgot. But was the fact that, Black people are often, in football, were looked at as like, no, you're not bright enough to run the team, but you can go run the football through this crowd or go over here and take a hit. Yeah. And once we saw these Black quarterbacks come into the game, they changed the entire landscape. People like Mike Vick and Randall Cunningham, like using his right hand and his left, and they started running the ball, and they started coming out of the pocket, and they like entirely like refaced what that position would be, when typically a white quarterback would step back, sit in the pocket, and throw. Yeah. And so, these are individuals that change the landscape of the game, and it's really about the fact that like now, like we see the same problems in advertising, which is like we're often not given that opportunity to lead, but when we do, like my man Andre Gray said, this shit's gonna go, right, and we're gonna start fucking shit up, right? Yeah. And so I think that's the position we're in now. I think we're starting to see more people get into these positions, and I think it's a beautiful thing, but most certainly not at the pace that we would like to expect to see. Exactly.
And then I think interesting what voices people choose to respect. But what I'm hearing is it's the voices who are avant-garde, right? Who are saying, I'm not following the structure or the system that you have placed on me. I'm going to be myself, right? Do you think that being yourself and still being, and as you are knowledgeable as a part of that self, has helped you in extending that authority within the industries?
Yeah, I think so. It took me a long time to be myself, right? And I think that every person has that moment. I think that the Gen Z is different, right? I think Gen Z, they are about it, right? And don't give a shit, right? And so entirely different set of folks, but like our generations though, I think it took time, and I think we'll all come to that moment of realization that when we can actually start being ourselves and when we can start showing up as ourselves, the quality of work that we do is gonna be like next to none. And so, for me, when I was at Viacom, I mean, it's funny, you go on my Instagram account and you could see the day to the T where it stopped, because like you scroll through, and if you're going from old to new, you scroll, and then like shoes, wingtip shoes and khakis and shit, and then boom, like hoodies and Jordans and sneakers, and I cut it off. And part of that was because, my boss, this white guy named Jason Witt, would show up with like t-shirts and Converse on and khakis, and like his button down would be unbuttoned and he got a white t-shirt on, and like I'm like, what, this shit's crazy. Like I wasn't used to this in a place like Viacom. And then he would go into meetings and drop F-bombs and fuck this and shit this and like and kill it and leave the room with everyone feeling like, yes, he said the sky is fucking purple, it's certainly purple. Like everyone would believe him. And it taught me a couple of things. It taught me like, well, fuck, people can still respect you, regardless of the way you look, and showing up feeling comfortable allows you to be confident. And so, I mean, part of that is why I cuss the way I cuss and talk the way I talk and show up the way I talk. And I think it most certainly inspires other individuals. And I like to say that it's important that the younger generations can see people who look like me, to know that like you can come in these rooms and have your hair look like this. You can come in these rooms and wear sneakers like this. You can come in these rooms and wear a hoodie, and that's totally fucking okay.
As it should be within as it should be overall, but also in creative industries and things like that. So, advertising. I think sometimes we think we are rocket scientists, in many cases, depending on which department you might just be, especially within your experience design department, which we're going to talk about soon.
Okay. All right.
But
man, you're doing your research, man. You're getting it in.
I know. So I want to talk about. So your patents were before the ad world, right? And so just staying on that, it takes a very particular understanding. It takes, of course, ingenuity and just creativity itself to create something so novice that you get a patent, right? Can you take me through what those processes are? I mean, if anyone doesn't know, Walt has mentioned he has multiple patents, about 6, right? So what is that process? Because I think that's such an interesting part of your story that I've always noted is, particularly from an intellectual property perspective.
So, and it takes money. It takes a good amount of money. So when I was at Viacom, again, like when I started there, I'd come in from Google, and my job was like help us create incremental revenue by way of new ad formats and new solutions. So what I realized there again is like everyone, we're all answering the same RFPs, we're all coming out with these big ideas, but like, again, throwing shit at the wall and hoping it sticks. So that's where we first invented or started, I won't say invented because they've been there, but like we created the very first usability lab that actually focused on advertising. So I'll go back and kind of explain how this works. I brought it up earlier. It's like individuals sit at a desk in front of the computer. We would create all these different functional demos, like real functioning work and ads on real pages, and we would literally hook them. We'd hook them up and it looked like they're in the ICU, like stuff in their hands, on their head, on their chest, and all this stuff. We were measuring things like heart rate, pupil dilation, sweat in the palms, which is oddly research people call it arousal. It's fucking really weird. I'm like, research, y'all got some problems. And then whether they're leaning back or forward, facial expressions. So through this, if you now can imagine this, we were able to look at a timeline and look at the animation of a creative across here, and as these certain thing happens, heart rate triggered right here. Their focus was right here, using heat mapping. The hand clicked on this, like, so you're able to see a range of emotions and understand what works based off things like color, call to action, animation, like speed of animation, position on page. So we could essentially create the perfect page and guarantee effectiveness. So what we are doing, since we had this lab and we built it out with MIT Labs, what we did is, okay, let's focus on some of our biggest brands that spend the most with us, and let's make formats based on category, right? That way, if we were trying to go after this one brand, we could also open it up to these others as well to see if they want to buy it. So when we did this, I was spending $10,000 a month getting help from an external resource to actually build. I think I was doing five ad products a month. Wow. Yeah, so there's a lot. Right? So like I was basically sitting around, and if you looked in my office, it was like drawings everywhere. It's like I just come up with random ideas, I'd like start to design it, and then I hand it to someone else to help finish and prototype it. So 5 products a year, 2 years we were doing this. Like, do the math. It's 120 formats. Of 120, only 5 resonated and really worked. That sold through. I was doing things like I took the entire video, like the scrubber and everything, and like re-skinned that whole thing. So like one of the first ones we did was for Target. So the whole player was like red, and then the bar was like red, and the little kind of scrubber piece was like the Target logo, and like. We sold that for like, that was like $7 million to run for 3 days. Wow. Right? So, you know, we did, I think those formats did something like $82 million in revenue over the 2 years, which is like crazy. And that was kind of like how my foray into like, you know, innovation and the patents happened. But what was interesting is as we started getting in and creating these things, it was like, you know, my boss, Jason, and this woman, Nada Strat, who at the time was their CRO, was like, you know, there's got to be a way to protect these because like we're bringing to all these salespeople, and they're showing it to all these different people. They could go elsewhere to have someone else make it. And I say, as a creative, one of the hardest things to do in that time, and it took me years to figure this out, was we hoard our work. So my thing was like, yes, I want to protect it. Yes, I don't want anyone to fuck with it. And then it's like when sellers were like, can I sell it to my client? And I was like, well, only from there, and I'll show it from my laptop. And they're like, what the fuck? Right. So I'm like running around the country, and people are like, yo, you can't give me the fucking deck. And I'm like, nope. But I was young and immature, right? And so we worked with these folks on our patent attorneys, and it was a pretty lengthy period of time. People don't realize, like, when you, like, the first thing you do is you apply for like a patent pending is another name for it, patent pending. And when you get that, that's free, right? And then when you do that, you hold on, you have quote unquote ownership over this product for, I think it's like 4 years or 3 years, something like that. And then once that time is up, you need to actually apply for a real patent, right? And then that costs money. I don't know exact price, but I will tell you the amount of time I spent with the attorneys on every one of those formats, it was a lot. So when you're paying hourly rates, I mean, for each product, I would have to guess we were well into $15,000, $20,000, $30,000 for the attorney's time. But what's interesting is when you start to think about patents for creative, and this is what's hard, it was almost impossible to protect creative, because a couple of layers. Like, number one is, from a technology point of view, we had to basically, no, let me go back. If I draw a circle on this table and I say, I'm gonna patent that circle, then I need to say, well now, like, that's almost impossible. Like, what is every single way I can make that circle? Well, I might draw it with a pen, I might draw it with a pencil, I might cut a circle on a piece of paper, put it there. You have to think of every possible way. And so with these digital solutions, like, there's so many different ways to use code to create a thing. So we're having to say, hey, you use HTML layers like this, use this, JavaScript like this, and write the technical way in. And then physically though, the way it appears is almost impossible to protect, right? You can't really say, I'm gonna protect that circle. You might be able to say the way I create that circle, right? So it's hard when you start to do patents around ad products and things of that nature. But the benefit was we would go out and make noise and say, hey, there's a patent pending, or these have patents. Or going out to clients and saying, hey, we did all this testing with all this usability testing, and by the way, all these have patents, and we're the only ones that can actually execute it. And now when this happens, of course, like, the big thing was, okay, I think I want that. I think I'll buy that, right? So it kind of hyped up, you know, in the advertisers and brands to want to buy this, because like I could be the first one to get it. And so realistically though, you can't protect that. So a great example, skippable pre-roll, right? I invented that at Viacom. We went out to press with it, and fucking 2 weeks later, YouTube's running it.
Okay, because you know it was on my mind, like, is that influenced by YouTube? Okay, so, or you all influence YouTube in that way? Which makes sense.
Okay. And so, like, of course, I'm like, well, fucking sue, right? And they're like, well, the way this stuff works. Yeah. But like, so the very first version of skippable pre-roll we did was E-Trade.
Yeah.
Which is odd. And so I called it the Porta-Pass, and even on my patent, it actually says references Porta-Pass. And so we did it with Coca-Cola. And the idea was a little different than 5, 4, 3, 2, 1 skip. It was, okay, if I'm going to get someone to skip this brand's Coca-Cola's 30-second spot, I need to allow the individual to engage with the product. And if they engage with the product, then it's like a one-to-one. It's like, thank you very much. Now you can skip. So there's a Coke bottle on the lower left-hand side, a bug unit. So it said pour to pass. When you scrolled your mouse over top of it, the bottle turned into your mouse. You flipped over, and then it started pouring Coke in the video player. That took 5 seconds. 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, and then boom, and then it skipped directly to the content that you asked for. Yeah. And then another piece came up saying this skip was powered by Coca-Cola. Nice. And so it was like positive, like, oh, thank you, shit, I got to interact with it and skip the shit I didn't want to see in the first place. So that was the very first iteration of it. Yeah.
I love that. So Walt, we've been talking a lot about how you approach innovation, right? From a media and technology perspective, and clearly now in the agency world. So you're now Chief Creative Officer, Innovation for North America. What does that entail? And I'd love to talk about some of the projects that we're working on now, but what does that entail overall?
Yeah, I'm still trying to figure that shit out. No, I mean,
what does that entail?
No, I mean, it is, it's interesting because it is a newly crafted role. My job is I still sit within experience design, right? So I still, own, teams across North America in that. But, my job is to think about gaps or identify gaps with some of our brands and think about what is the bigger idea or execution. Oftentimes when people talk about innovation, it's like, okay, well, what are we going to do with AI? Or what are we going to do with this thing? No, it's about solving a problem for these individuals, right? And if the solution happens to be AI, or the solution happens to be some type of technology, then so be it. But I'm kind of looking at it from a 360 lens kind of point of view, right? Which is like, how do we come at this from TV, digital, social, etc., and do something unique? And look, for some brands like Advil, right, we were talking about earlier, like that is and something that's focused around pain and equity, right, and how we tackle a massive problem. So, the word innovation is just so loosely used that, and so broad, if you go around a room and ask everyone, you probably have 5, 6 definitions of what that is.
Absolutely. Well, let's talk about Advil a bit and, solving that problem, which is a large problem. I got to tell you, we're also focused on Black healthcare disparities and kind of showing that to agency professionals within our research. But how did you all focus on like Black pain being a primary theme for Advil? And can you tell us more about what that campaign was?
Yeah, I mean, when you look at an athlete like Serena Williams, who quite frankly is probably knows her body better than any human being on the planet, right? Because that's her job. And she can walk into a hospital ready to give birth and say, hey, there's a problem, and almost die because no one believes her. Well, that's a fucking problem, right? So now when we go back to the everyday Black American walking into a hospital, like we're often not heard. We're often like, and a lot of that is due to racism. And I'm not gonna say every doctor is racist, but there most certainly are bias. And they're biased because when you're in medical school and up until like 6 years ago, reading things like Black people have thicker skin, Black people have a higher threshold of pain in medical books 6 years ago, that's crazy. So, Advil's whole story is around kind of, attacking things, addressing things at the source, right? So, So in doing so, they came, and of course, so many brands right now want to do purpose-driven work. Their CMO, Katie Williams, is an incredible human being, and Stacey Harris as well, both Black women, understood that this is a problem, understood that this is things they've gone through. Look, one of my dearest friends, Tim, who worked for me up until 2 years ago, like a week before Christmas, in Jersey City, goes into a hospital, goes in the ER rooms, or 3 years ago, saying something's wrong, I feel something in my leg, I think it's a clot, something's wrong. They kept him waiting in the ER room for hours. He's text messaging with one of his friends saying, I think I'm gonna fucking die here, something's not right. He died in the waiting room in the ER room, waiting to get help, which is fucking crazy. So this is a problem, right? And so we tackle this 3 ways. Number one is we need to allow Black people to know that, or feel as though they've been heard and they've been seen, and that we all understand that this is a major problem. So we shot an incredible docu-series, which we put online onto a site where we had Elaine Welteroth hosting it. We had Dr. Uche Blackstock, who's like a very, renowned, black medical doctor from Brooklyn. It was, and 5 patients, all telling their stories, and they're fucking horrific. And I can tell you, in casting for this, I spent 2 weeks listening to maybe like 100, black individuals telling their stories, and it was probably one of the darkest moments of my life, and I'm saying my life. To sit and hear so many black women, black men of all ages suffer for not being heard and not being seen and not being listened to. So, part 1 is, yes, the series, getting the reach, getting people to hear. Part 2 of that was, okay, now we need to arm black people so when they go into these medical places or, establishments, they have the questions and tools and things to ask so they can make sure that they're being heard and seen. And then the last piece was, and this is a big one, right, which is like really impactful shit, is we partnered with Morehouse Medical School and Black Health out of Atlanta and nonprofit, and we created curriculum for medical schools. It is now starting to roll out, or end of this year it's going to start rolling out, first in Morehouse, and then we hope every PW, predominantly white college across the country, right? Because we want to go and teach about these biases, about these issues, about the fact that these medical books are wrong. And that is how real impact is made. And I think because we're focusing on medical students, like that younger generation is so much more open to diversity and creating change that's what we have to do. Like, it's addressing it at the source.
I love that.
Thank you, man.
I mean, impactful work. Also have to have my bias myself and say shout out to the AUC in Morehouse as a graduate of Morehouse College at least.
My cousin went there.
Nice, yeah. The Morehouse is amazing. Morehouse School of Medicine is just a beacon in Atlanta, and they're doing some growth there too. So I'm glad that you all were partnering with a black medical school, right, in Atlanta to tell these stories. I would say tell the stories and also show the challenges. What importance is it in making sure that you connect your strategies in ways that they're culturally specific, right, where you're not going to, let's say, NYU Langone, instead of Morehouse School of Medicine, and for these types of campaigns particularly?
I mean, authenticity is key, right? I think that consumers can smell that a mile away, right? And if you're not being authentic, you're going to lose in a really big way. So, when we address this with Advil, and I'll still never forget, when we got down to the idea, the crux of the idea, and we had a manifesto that my team wrote that was just brilliant. And I stood up in front of this our clients, maybe like 12 people in the room, and read a 30-second manifesto, and everyone was in tears, right? And I think it was a moment where we turned on the lights, everyone's eyes are bloodshot, and we thought, this is it. This is what we have to do. And I've never had a moment in my career like that with a client where everyone was touched in that way. And so, when we started to move forward into the work, it was obvious that we wanted to have our director was black, right? Who shot everything. Our obviously our cast, but everyone involved needed to be black because they needed to be individuals who understood and understand what it means to make this or to create this type of change. And so, for brands moving in different directions, regardless of what it is they're trying to do, you have to have people that are along for the ride and have a seat at the table that have been affected by whatever the thing is that you're trying to change. If I'm doing, if we get 6 dudes together to create the next, tampon product, what the fuck? I don't know about fucking tampons. You don't know about tampons. So we need to have a woman involved. If you're talking about, some form of disability, well, fucking have someone there who has this disability who can address it. So yeah, it's super important because in this day and age, it is, and I hate to use the word canceled, but it'll happen quick, man, and consumers will sniff it out.
And how important is it for the client to at least have an understanding of the issue, right? Because it's almost hard, not always hard, I should say, because we're represented in brands and the media spaces, right? But I think it was quite unique for Advil's, your clients to be working with to be black women, right? So the buy-in is a little easier, right? Have you found any challenges in those clients who are not of a diverse community who still want to tap into culture, and how do you sell that?
I've had difficulty with clients who are black because they have to sell it to a white leadership, right? So like, yeah, I mean, it's beyond just the people who are on the other side, because yeah, it's a challenge for CMO, because the CMO's job is to come in here, disrupt, and make the brand look incredible. But let's be honest too, right? The life expectancy of a CMO at most brands is about 2 to 3 years.
Yeah.
They're in one door and out the other. So it's tricky when you bring this type of work, because everyone has to be signed up and everyone has to believe. So, you know, proof's in the pudding. And I always say that when you're tackling issues like this, like telling real stories when you present these ideas is the shit that's going to move the needle. Yeah. Going out and getting real insights and real research. You know, the best person like that I can work with is my CSO or my strategists. You know, like those are the individuals that make creatives look smarter. And so when you go in, you need to be armed with the real data. And also, you got to be working with people who believe and want to create the change that you're trying to create. And that's not going to be everybody. You know, again, like many brands want to do the loud talking and the loud shit, but many are also afraid. One of the most powerful pieces of work that I am the absolutely most jealous of, which is the thing, but Beats You Love Me, right? Or You Love Me. And it was dropped at a time when George Floyd had just been murdered, and they just came out with this piece of content that was all black and white. And it was like stories of these individuals saying, like, you say you love me, but do you really love me? You love my hair, you know, you love my music, you love my style. That. And it was like, wow, you want to talk about coming out like punching. Yeah. And so it's so hard for brands to do that thing because there's a fear. You know, Nike comes out and supports Colin, and then you got, you know, everyone is on social burning Nike sneakers and jerseys and whatnot. Yes. So, and they stood their ground. They're like, oh, and what? Yeah. You know, so again, every brand wants to do purpose-driven work, but it's not for everybody.
Yeah. We literally just had a client conversation on a strategy perspective, and it's like you have to almost be afraid to lose in many cases, and gain those communities and that audience which you want to reach, right? Yeah. So many people are like, our base clients, our older clients are this community, and we don't want to upset this community at the peril of ignoring other and newer audiences, not knowing their power from a financial perspective, right? So it's interesting. I love what you mentioned. You have to be prepared to lose. You have to just stand behind it and defend it and say, fuck it, this is what we're doing, right? And brands are scared of that. Oh, yeah. And how are you consulting brand partners to deny that fear?
Yeah, I think it's trust, man. Right? Like you have to get a client to trust you, right? And for some too, it's also like testing the waters. Like I would, you know, I think that, you know, the Believe My Pain equity project with Advil, that was, I think, for them testing the waters, right? And they got to kind of tiptoe in and realize that and they took some heat, right? There was about like a couple weeks after, 2 or 3 weeks after the launch, a really big MAGA, you know, movement came after it on Twitter, and it was just like millions of people were coming after it. Oh, and this, and it was a lot of shit. And I think for a moment there was this like, oh shit, what do we do? And then they all stood their ground, like, no, we're gonna keep moving forward. The very next day, boom, knocked the next piece of content out and kept it going. You know, but for them, I think that was like testing the waters, and we'll see how they move, you know, in this next year with doing it, because they did a multi-year commitment to it. You know, it's not an easy thing, but I think some of it, for some people, it's testing, and for others, it's just trust, man. And trust me, man, before they spend millions of dollars on this stuff, like, they are doing so much research and getting so much insights. Like, proof is in the pudding. You have to go out and get that insights to know that you're gonna be okay when you go out. And when you do it, you have to tell your story in an authentic way.
Yes.
You know?
For sure. We had a great conversation. Brian and Brian Owens, Amber Shinivert, great strategists, had a conversation on ensuring data and authenticity within. And so I love you pushing and also making note that is the foundation of a great campaign. Let's go into some of the work you're doing to diversify the industry overall. So you did Black Madison Avenue, which was a larger, let's say, series to talk and display the, I think 7 of 9 at that time, executive creative directors. Now you all are in the chief creative officer roles.
6 of the 7 now are now CCOs. Yeah.
Wow,
that's 3 of them global.
Wow. Right. So 6. Let's say that again. 6 of the 7 are now chief creative officers.
Chief creative officers, and 3 of them are global.
Nice. So in thinking about that, I think that was a charge to the industry itself. Clearly, with the level of visibility that it had. What inspired that? I know that, you know, what inspired it?
Yeah, I think for me, selfishly, I wanted to meet all of them. Yeah. We hadn't met before, hadn't gotten in person. And it's funny, we had been in a text string already, and New York festivals, came out, and they're like, hey, we want to support your platform and your voice and what you're doing. Do you want to shoot something? And I was like, all right, cool. Like what? And they're like, we'll give you like multiple cameras and lighting and sound and everything. They gave me a whole set and just whatever you feel like doing. So I reached out on text to this group, and I was like, because we still have the same thread, and I was like, hey, can we jump on a Zoom? I want to tell you about this idea I have. And we got on the Zoom. I talked about what I want to do. Hey, let's sit down and let's just get real. And we shouldn't do this if we don't want to be real and authentic. Yeah. And it could cost some of us our yell down. And it was a resounding yes. And we had like a 3-hour conversation on that Zoom. The film would have been probably better than what we ended up with, because it was incredible. But at the end of that conversation, we just understood the importance and significance of it in the moment they were in, with all these agencies making all these promises to hire and all this stuff that never really came to fruition. Yeah. And I think that it created a bit of a moment, all right, and a bit of a ripple effect. And we did see some uptick. I mean, again, not nearly as much as we should. And, it's not just about like, oh, just us got bumps, right? It inspired a lot of people, man. It went into universities, Duke University, UNC, like all these schools added it to their marketing curriculum, nice. Rutgers, and a whole slew of folks. So, it was an inspiring moment, man, and one I most certainly won't forget.
I love that. I mean, it calls out the problem very quickly, and then like you mentioned, it's doing the work continuously, right? So it's not one of the things where it's like, oh, we released it, it's done. It's continuing to impact, which we love too. Also, in thinking about the ways that you're impacting the industry, you have something like Black Madison Avenue, and now you have something like Black Week, right? Yeah. Which is a conference that is driving culture forward, if I'm not mistaken.
Absolutely,
that's the name of the tagline. And what I love about Black Week is it's focused on executives and ensuring that people are getting it from a financial perspective just as much as they're getting that from a purpose-driven perspective.
You got the
Many times they're not disconnected either. Yeah. So can you tell me more about Black Week? Like, what was the inspiration? There's so many amazing people within it. So.
Yeah, you nailed it, man. I think, the intent is that we want to be like the Black Davos, right? It is an economic forum meant to show people the importance and significance of the Black and brown dollar, right? And ensuring that we are not just individuals on the other side of a transaction, but individuals that should be in the rooms and helping make decisions. And when we talk about, moving culture forward, our intent really is to bring a slew of leaders together to really talk about how they are making change, and the fact that like creating things like diverse teams and focusing on diverse audiences has made a significant impact on their businesses and their clients' businesses. So, our big thing is we want to figure out a way to filter money back into the Black and brown community, right? And that's not year one, but where we want to go with this is, hey, how can we say that we've generated $10 million back or given back to the Black community by way of hires, by way of promotions, by way of, investments in Black-owned, all of these things, investments in Black media, Black creative agencies. And when we focus on bringing all these leaders together, we're hoping that they all inspire each other and take these learnings back to the places. But we also have more than executives there. Like we gave out a ton of passes to Creative Ladders and the One Club to ensure that they're actually bringing creatives with 5 or less years. Last week we gave away 50 passes to 50 unemployed people, right, to ensure that like those people who have a hard time getting access to these type of spaces are able to come. And then we had around 237 people apply for that, and to apply you need to submit your resume, and now all 237 we're giving their resumes to all of our sponsors of the event. And for the 100 and whatever change, that 190 something, 180 something, 187 that didn't get those free passes, we gave 50% off, right? So our thing is like with this event is we want all individuals to be there from all races, all colors, shapes, sizes, different levels of seniority in companies to really be in one place to inspire each other to move forward.
I love that. And it's happening, when is it happening?
October 15th.
October 15th. Yeah. So around the same time as Advertising Week-ish, around it.
So it was, we had planned to do the same week, and then they decided to move to the week before.
Okay. You think there's a coincidence there?
I'm not saying, but their dates changed.
Yeah. What's the impact and reason for connecting it to Advertising Week, though? Or not less connected, but...
I mean, we wanted to disrupt it a bit, right? To just kind of make sure that, all these people are going to be here, then come downtown, right? Which was going to be part of our tagline. But, look, I think it worked out. We have a lot of people actually coming to attend. We're trying to keep it under 1,000 people, and and a tight knit group of folks to kind of be inspired. So we're all really excited about it. It's funny. It's the way it came up was Joe was talking to a handful of us, and it's like, yeah, we should do something, and we were all kind of like, yeah, but what? And he's like, we should create a conference, and the moment, and everyone's coming down hard on DEI, and we all agreed. And like 2 weeks later, he's like, yo, I got a director, we're gonna do a shoot in 2 weeks. And we're like, wait, what? And he's like, yeah, you guys good? And we were like, all right. And then worked on the script a bit. We got in about a week or two later, a lot of the content pieces were done, and we reviewed them, and we were like, yo, this shit is hard. Yeah. And then we're like, let's test it out, see what happens. I put it online, and it blew up into a thing, and Adweek and Ad Age and all these people started writing about it. And it just went full steam ahead, man.
I love that. I think one of the amazing points of the work that you do is that you make it an event, and you make it as branded as we are, advertisers and creators. And it was funny because the industry does not do it all the time for the work that, or at least agencies don't do it for themselves in many cases, unless it's, for different awards and such. And so I love the focus and dedication to quality. Right, for any campaign that you're doing, whether it's for a client or whether it's for the industry. Absolutely. I think that's important. So I'm just giving you your flowers on that.
Thank you, man. I love that. Thank you.
I want to talk just a few more questions, just on one, your thoughts around the industry. I mean, we've talked a lot about, the need for culture and stuff. It's not lost upon me that as we're recording this, there's been a presidential even campaign or a presidential nominee shift, at least on the Democratic side, that's possibly increasing hope that we did not have before.
Yeah, absolutely.
That's just in my perspective. So that's
absolutely. I agree.
So what are your thoughts on this, like, given that this current DEI backlash that we're seeing? Because for me, it's like we went from kind of doomful and we need DEI to something where people are hopeful that inclusion will be a part of this fabric, at least for the next 4 years.
Yeah, I mean, we've been in a really weird place these past few years, and I think space for Black people, we feel uncomfortable and uneasy again, and this kind of reverse in time and history of like the good old days, and it's scary, man. It's a wild thing to think. And people talking about war and this and that. No, it's crazy. We saw a dramatic shift 5 years ago in the space, and with Floyd being murdered and whatnot. And we saw everyone kind of turn around like, we're gonna put all this funding and do all this stuff. But like all that shit was kind of hidden. Like where did the money go? Like no one knows where a lot of that shit went. So a lot of that was empty promises. But this is something that we've seen all the time, right? And we can go back many decades to see how promises are made and they're just kind of crumbs, and then they fall by the wayside and it's gone, because we have these spikes in moments, something happens, and then it's like, don't worry, everyone will forget. We'll be back to normal again. Yeah. I think what we see now with Kamala is incredible, because we've come from this place of like doom and gloom and like, oh man, here we go. Because I think people did believe like this shit's gonna be a wrap, man. Like this, the fuck, and racists and these people are coming out in numbers now and just so like emboldened, to come out and say the things they say, and to have someone like a Kamala come in here and kind of switch things up, I think it re-inspired people, right? And I think created this moment where we all hope that there's going to be some form of change and a pause on some of the disruption that we're seeing around DE&I and whatnot. So it's crazy times, man, but like I'm definitely feeling inspired, and part of Black Week was intentionally because of this what's going on in DE&I, and so we're hoping that we can all come into this one place and shift the mindset, so to speak, of the way that we are going, right? This path we're going, because I think 10, 15, 20 years from now, it's going to be like, what side were you on, right? And it's going to be like, no, I wasn't on this side. Well, there's a picture of you right there doing that one thing. So it's going to be real one day, and people are going to look back and say, this was a fucked up moment in time.
Yeah, I agree. I think it's interesting, of course, 5 years ago, and the let's say promises that we heard from these people. I love your note. Like, where did the money go? I'm not sure either. But and I'm kind of pausing because I don't want to put too much on Kamala's, nomination, but that is a shift, I think. Do you find that clients are ebbing and flowing based on this kind of social environment.
Of course, absolutely.
Yeah, you see what happened with Dylan Mulvaney maybe a year ago, right? Yeah. Target and Pride Month, and right. So this whole idea of DEI backlash came from some of those situations.
Yeah, absolutely.
And now it's kind of like, well, maybe we do need to be thinking about diversity.
Yeah, I mean, yeah, because when you have someone like a potential Trump to come into office who's trying to kill us, in Florida and Texas and everything that's going on there, yeah, absolutely. Brands are being like, well, fuck it, like we can take a breather now. Yeah. We don't really have to do this shit because like laws are changing and we're not necessarily going to get in trouble for it. Now, again, you have someone like Kamala who comes in office and those changes don't come to fruition, then it's going to be like, okay, so back to my quiet corner and kind of see where we land.
Yeah.
Accountability is something, man, when you don't have anyone there to kind of address it, and I think that when we have, someone like a Trump in office, then yeah, it's like I think a lot of executives feel better about that. And truth of the matter is because, white men have never had to work as hard as we have, especially black women, to get into positions of power.
Absolutely.
Because white men from a young age, again, were taught to ask for the shit that they want, right? I'm gonna say what I want. You and I have been taught that, hey, work hard and focus hard, and you're gonna get recognized for the work, and that's bullshit, right? And so, we white men have the privilege of, hey, they're good enough to do the job, right? We think, right? And they have the stuff that it needs to do it, and we have to prove that no, we have to show examples of the work that allow you to get in some of these rooms. So, it's there's a fear of like, well, if I give to them, then that means less for me. So I have to let Bobby and Jen and Jessica go, and we've been college roommates and whatever, known each other for years. I can't do that. Like making room for you means I have to let go them when it's not the case, because tables can be stretched.
Yes. I was going to ask you about that, but that's the clip right there. I'm not going to take this out, but yes, tables can be stretched, right? I think the scarcity mindset is driving a lot of this conversation in not investing in diversity. Either scarcity mindset or they just plain don't want to do it until they're forced to do it, which usually takes death or violence, right? So I love the point on accountability too, because that's the work you're doing, right? So going into our last conversation, you're doing so much in the industry, and clearly that takes a lot of time. In May of 2024, or May of this year, actually, you wrote an op-ed in Ad Age that talked about kind of some experiences you had with healthcare, and also how driving some of the work you're doing and the passion that you have and the time it takes to be the leader that you are, how that experience shaped how you also participate in this world, right? As far as timing and stuff. Could you tell us more about your experience and go from there?
I mean, long story really short, I had a stroke, man, and it's like you think about people who have strokes and you think, oh, someone who's obese and da-da-da, and that's not the case. So it's like 1 in 4 people have what's called a PFO. PFO is basically a flap that sits in between your heart. That before we're born, that flap is open. When we're born, you take your first breath, that it closes, and it's like a Velcro. And so 1 in 4 people, that Velcro doesn't stick. So I happen to be one of those. And in those 1 in 4 people, just about 100% of those individuals are walking time bombs, not knowing that usually before the age of 55, that's going to cause you to have a massive heart attack or stroke. Right, so it's like it will happen potentially at some point. And the way it happens is there's a particle. When we produce plaque every single day, it goes up into the right side of the heart, and then that sends it back down to the liver and cleans it out. When that flap opens and closes, which oftentimes happens when you, what's called valsalve, which is like, straining, picking something up, that opens up, that particle goes through it, or that plaque goes through it, your left side pumps blood to your brain. So it goes up, cause stroke, right? So that's what happened to me. 5 weeks later, I had heart surgery and we were good to go. But, it made me reevaluate kind of life as a whole and how I move. And, this advertising space will kill you. It will suck everything from you. And the minute you die, you'll be like when my friend Tim passed away, I had to fucking post his job a week later. Wow. Right? And that's the reality of what we do, right? And it's like we have this norm of like working 60, 70 hours a week, and that's supposed to be the way it is for you to get promoted and move up. And I've kind of just, I'm tired of the shit, right? So like my thing is like, I'm gonna work on how I can be successful within my hours of 9 to 5 and get the best creativity possible out of my team between the hours of 9 to 5, knowing that like that 5 until after should be time where I'm able to rest and focus on my health, my mental health, right? And it's important for individuals if we want to live a longer life, because stress has been known to be direct correlation to strokes, right? And heart attacks and things of that nature. It happens, it increases your blood pressure. So yeah, I mean, I think it's important that we understand that, life is like a fucking dot on a timeline, an infinite potentially timeline, right? And if you're able to be lucky enough to live 100 years, even 100 years is nothing, right? So what are you doing with the time that you have now to create change and make impact in individuals' lives? And like, yes, I can do that through my work in advertising, but I'm also not going to allow it to suck everything from me.
Absolutely.
You know?
Absolutely. And documenting your experience with that, again, creates that awareness for people who don't know about it, and or for people who need to maybe shift their schedules a bit too. I want to end by thanking you for this conversation. And my last question is, I know that you also wrote that your family, your daughter, is a large part of the work that you're doing, your big why, right? What would you tell, because these generations, they're working and they're doing, they're pursuing their dreams like now, right? What would you tell, or what do you tell your daughter or someone who's 15, 20, who's looking to get into this industry, creativity, technology, marketing, advertising? What do you tell them?
Always be yourself, always be show up as you, it doesn't matter, show up with the curls in the hair, the way you walk, your style, like do all of that, because when you are able to come out as you and be the best of you, then nothing can stop you, right? Like, I'm a firm believer that creativity is the extent of your imagination, but you can't get there if you don't know who you are, right? So focus on being you and never fucking stop for anybody.
That's the aha moment, as Oprah would say. Walt, it was amazing talking to you. I appreciate your and good.
Thank you, sir.
Always.
Thank you.
I appreciate you. And everyone, Walt Geer, find him on LinkedIn and every other place. And that's it.